Welcome to the Stiles Council, a podcast all about the England football team. I'm Chris Nee, and my England supporting pal at the other end of the internet is David Hartrick. All right, Dave?
Yes, not too bad at all. How are you?
I'm all right. We'll get straight into it because it's a relatively sort of busy period for non-on-field England bits and bobs. Kicking off as we do with one little bit of news-ish. We now have several young English players in the German Bundesliga, Dave. And Ademola Lookman's gone over and made his debut and scored. And it's as fine a symbol as you could hope to get of the plus points of these youngsters being there. So Reece Oxford was the first one. He's made his way back to Borussia Mönchengladbach now. Jadon Sancho, for me, is the one that I'd really like to come on and chat a little bit about. But Lookman's goal feels like it's taken the whole story up a notch.
Yeah, and let's be honest as well. It was a really good goal as well.
Yes,
in terms of how he took it, in terms of the maturity to take it at that stage of the game, because. He'd come on as substitute. I think he played about 20 odd minutes, didn't he, in total?
Yeah, he did.
And what an impact! But I think there's two sides to this question, isn't there? Really, and I think we should probably handle them separately. Or I say question, I mean issue. One is the idea of English players going to the Bundesliga, and the other side is young English players going abroad to get minutes in any league, isn't it? And I think if we start Bundesliga specific, I think it's not the Premier League, and I think that is entirely a good thing. I think it's an even better thing that it's not the Championship. People who are listening to this, I'm sure, will know that me and Chris are often on another podcast, the Football Fives. And I've talked about what an absolute bear pit the Championship is, how demanding 3 games a week is. It's just relentless, absolutely relentless. And seeing our young players saying, no, they don't want an endless stream of loans to Middlesbrough and Nottingham Forest, etc., etc. They want to go somewhere different. They want to try somewhere different. They want to see a different culture. They want to play in a different league. Is really, to me, it's really inspiring, and it makes me really hopeful that we're not gonna waste 75% of these 3 generations of really good players we've got coming through.
I'm really excited by it. I think it shows a level of ambition and a level of intelligence of these players to understand the lay of their land in the Premier League now. And Lookman's the one, Dave, who, we're told really pushed for a move to Germany over a spell in the Championship specifically. And for a 20-year-old, that's quite a statement. Now, he wasn't the first one to go over there, so to a certain extent, the path has been made for him. But we're talking here about a Charlton Athletic product who's got experience from Everton. I think it was last January he moved to Everton, and has now taken that loan to Leipzig and came on and scored a last-minute winner, which was a belter, against Gladbach, funnily enough. Reece Oxford wasn't playing, but it was Gladbach who they were playing against. And at the same time, Everton were getting destroyed by Arsenal. So it became a bit of a thing that he'd made a good move and was kind of looking back into England and kind of laughing at Everton. I'm sure that's not the case. As it happens, out of the 3 of them, Lookman is kind of the one who I knew least about at club level until he came on in the Merseyside derby. Reece Oxford came into the West Ham team, famously made his Premier League debut against Arsenal at 16. And he's kind of steeped in the England youth side as well. And last summer he made, kind of out of the blue, I'm sure for West Ham supporters it wasn't, But for neutrals, it was out of the blue, a loan to Mönchengladbach. And they spoke well of him, but didn't play him until December. But the idea of a permanent move has come up more than once from their side now. Again, Gladbach was somewhere he actively pushed for on this second loan. And I wonder, Dave, if you think that Oxford has kind of broken the seal on this thing. He was the first one to do it. He made, you can't describe it as a roaring success, but all parties were happy about it, and he seems to have benefited hugely from going over there, even if it took him a while to get some proper minutes.
Mm.
How important is it that we have these English kids who will choose to go and explore on a kind of cultural level and an intelligence and an exploration level, as well as just getting active playing time?
It's absolutely massive. One of the drums I always beat about World Cups and European squads, etc., European Championship squads, is that we have too many players who are so insular that going away for 4 to 6 weeks in a squad to a different country, living in a hotel, etc., is a really alien experience. That, I mean, if you look at, say, South Africa 2010, 2006 World Cup, that was a major part of our downfall. And I think players who are willing to expand their horizons, who are willing to take a bit of a leap into the unknown, can only benefit the entirety of the English squad. And you look at Reece Oxford, and that is such a pivotal position now in modern football as a defensive midfielder, which is his sort of preferred position, that it's no surprise really that he goes on loan and he has to earn his minutes in a Bundesliga side. That's exactly as it should be. The difference is, I think, he has earned those minutes, and he has got those minutes, and he's earned his move back. And like you say, there's a lot of talk that he would like to go there permanently, and he wouldn't be doing that unless he had a guarantee of playing more. If he stays at West Ham, the reality of Premier League football is, if you don't take your opportunity first time round, you might get one more, you might get two more if you're lucky, but after that, you're through the trapdoor. And you're out on loan, and you get into what we'll call the Patrick Bamford paradox, where you're just on the treadmill constantly. And I would love to see, particularly in defensive positions, because I know what you're saying about Reece Oxford, but we shouldn't forget, obviously, that Michael Mancian went out to the Bundesliga and did very, very well out there. Now, his career has not gone as you'd hope afterwards, but everybody has a sort of talent ceiling. Not everybody can get into the alleged best 26 players in the country. So I hope more young footballers do it. I hope more young English footballers in all positions go and do it. And I would love, more than anything, a couple of our goalkeepers to go and try it. Because I think the Premier League is such a unique environment for goalkeepers that it would be good for them in particular to expand those horizons. Ask David De Gea if the Premier League is a little bit different from La Liga, for instance.
Yeah, quite. What really pleases me about these players is that, it's not just a little group of players who decided that it would be a nice adventure to go and learn their trade elsewhere. These are England underage players who've had success in an England shirt. We're talking about Lookman, under-20 World Cup winner. Yeah. Oxford has done well. Was he in any of the squads over the summer? I don't know if he was, actually.
I honestly can't remember without double-checking. He was, didn't he? Wasn't he carrying an injury, though?
Yeah.
I think
there's some reason why I'm not sure that I remember seeing him in those.
I think he may have had an injury, but I would have to double check that.
Yeah. But the other player we've not touched on yet is Jadon Sancho, who's an under-17 World Cup winner, and Euro player at the tournament in the summer as well. And this is a Watford youth player who signed for Manchester City at 15, has played for England at 16s, 17s and 19s already at 17 years old. And he's signed permanently for Borussia Dortmund last August. Again, had to bide his time a little, but has now started a few games. And Dortmund seem wise enough that they're keen to ease him in, but they want to use him as well. This permanent move, Dave, and we've seen him on the pitch now a few times. It looks good on him, doesn't it?
Yeah, and the thing we can't escape from with Sancho's move is Borussia Dortmund, who are a sort of renowned hothouse for young attacking talent. You only have to look into their very, very, very recent history to find a string of names who will all be present and correct at the World Cup. So for them to, the really encouraging thing is if you look at all the press around the move and everything that came out of Dortmund, there was none of the sort of Englishisms of, taking a punt or anything like that. They are absolutely certain he has got a huge first team future. I think the move means that he will be prepared to be a little bit more patient than he would be at a Premier League club. He'll know that when he gets into the first team, if he has a little drop in form and finds himself out, he will be able to get himself back in there. And it's away from imagine as things stand, being Phil Foden and looking at that Man City squad ahead of you, particularly in the attacking positions, and honestly weighing up whether you are going to get meaningful football or whether you are going to get League Cup, dead rubbers, lots of appearances in friendlies, lots of promises, lots of places on subs bench, and that's about it. Because I take my hat off to Sancho for the move, really, but I'm really, really encouraged by the Dortmund side of things. And when he's come on as well, he looks good. He looks really good. And I do not want to fall into the Walcott trap of thinking that we have another really, really good player and a game-changing player. But at this stage of his career, he has all the attributes that you look and you think, well, in 4 or 5 years' time, he could well be there. But as I said, I've been fooled by various English attacking talents in the past, so I'm playing those cards very close to my chest on this one.
Foden's a really interesting comparison because City are using him now, but there is no case to be made that Phil Foden goes to the World Cup in the summer. Is there a case to be made to take one of the players in the Bundesliga, depending on how they go in the next few months? They're not too young, are they?
What I go back to all the time, Chris, is that I think it was 2000. Was it? Yeah, I think it was 2010 or Euro 2012. I forget which German squad it was. I'm pretty sure it was the World Cup. Actually, I'm pretty sure it was 2010. But they took Mario Götze along. After his sort of first breakthrough season, with pretty much the intention of not playing him at all. But what it was a recognition that this was a player who's got a future for the national team. He's going to be playing for an awful long time and getting an awful lot of caps. We want him in this environment. We want him to experience a tournament situation, a tournament setup, so that nothing's a surprise. So that if his development goes as they think it's going to go over the next 2, 4, 6, 8 years, his international football is pop and crisps. He's quite happy in either environment, and it worked to an extent. The problem was he got a horrific injury where he basically fractured his pelvis, for a stress fracture that has sort of stymied his career. But that approach, I would really like to see that sort of long-term thinking from people in charge of the England squad. Now, I know lots of people listening to this are thinking Theo Walcott, Sven-Goran Eriksson, but that was it wasn't the same situation as Goetze. It smacked almost of desperation to me, the Walcott situation. And yeah, I don't want anybody in the squad from that point of view, but I do think that if you're good enough and you know the sort of 18 players that are going to make up your first team and your first team bench, I think there is a lot to be said for including one or two in there who are, you're hoping are going to go and win 60, 70, 80 caps for their country and play at 3 or 4 tournaments, so that it isn't a big shock. Yeah, but that sort of long-term thinking is not something that sits very well with England and the footballing authorities, as we know, Chris.
No, I think they've got work to do, all of them, to really justify a spot. I think this season, Sancho in particular is proven in an England shirt, and if he can do well in the Bundesliga for one of their biggest clubs, with plenty of competition for his position, let's not forget.
Yeah, get him in. Get him in.
Yeah, I mean, it's a graduation, isn't it? What else are the youth teams for? And yeah, he's 17 years old and he's got a long way to go.
We've got a string of friendlies before the World Cup. There's absolutely no point playing the team is going to start the World Cup, which I think me and Chris, between us, we could probably name 8 out of 11 who are definitely going to start. That is the prime opportunity to have a look at somebody like that. And if he comes in and he's a breath of fresh air and he lifts a few people around him, take him. There is absolutely nothing to be lost by taking him. It's exactly the same situation we had with Marcus Rashford, isn't it? In the last Euros, where we took him and he was a breath of fresh air when he came on. We gave him the last 10 minutes of the fateful Iceland game, didn't we? And suddenly we looked a different side. We actually looked like we might get something out of it. We didn't, but we looked like that. So yeah, I'm all for having a punt really on somebody like that. If it proves to be too early, if they don't quite gel, if the shirt looks a bit heavy, no problem. He's a kid. Give him another year, 2 years, whatever he needs. But if he comes in and he feels fresh, it feels new, and he's quite happy in that environment, then capitalise on that.
Yeah, it's a fascinating situation, but I'm talking mainly through my nose, so we better move on. Our main topic this week is kind of about the Football Association rather than England specifically. Various sponsorships and relationships with gambling companies and relationships with kit manufacturers and so on come up every few years. And it's kind of had the two of us pondering whether the Football Association, in the position that it's in, has a duty to support specifically British and I guess really English businesses with its huge amount of commercial activity. We know how commercially driven the Football Association is. Do you think, David, it has any kind of responsibility beyond its own coffers? Does it have any community responsibility, ethical responsibility before we get into the English businesses part of it?
I tell you what, I struggle with this question. I can completely understand the FA's approach and the FA doing what they do in terms of taking all the sponsorships and endorsements that every other international team around the world does. So, England for a great number of years were very tied in with McDonald's, for instance, who did everything from their TV advertising with various England internationals, Alan Shearer memorably and various others, to they were quite prominent at Wembley on the advertising. And you sort of think, well, the FA have to play for Wembley. There is huge financial responsibilities on them. It's not surprised that they do take these tie-ins with Budweiser, with Coca-Cola, with etc., etc. But at the same time...
That's EE, that one, by the way, listeners.
But at the same time, it would be... I hate to use the word nice, because it's the word I hate more than any other, I think. but it would be nice to see some sort of ethically driven trend towards identifying English companies and British businesses, regardless of what you think of Brexit, etc. And me and Chris are firmly on the same page with our feelings. But it would be nice in these sort of times of pretty much turmoil and what have you is coming up. It would be nice if football decided to use itself as a vehicle to try and support British business more. But I just think it's a nigh on impossible thing to do when you have great big multinational companies who are willing, I mean, let's be honest, Chris, who are willing to pay massively over the odds for these sponsorships and these commercial link-ups as well. It's a very difficult question, and I would love to see that drive towards supporting more British business, but I can also, as I said, completely understand why it's not there currently.
Yeah, I think that the FA being what it is, yes, there is a commercial aspect to it, but we can't allow ourselves to just write it off as another big business. That being the case, it has ethical responsibilities, and for my preferences, it hasn't been nearly clear enough in its dealings with the gambling industry, for example. Yeah. And I would like England, and by extension the FA, to be above that. Now, I'm not necessarily opposed to big names sponsoring England or part of England, as long as they're not evil and they pay their taxes and things like that. The Britishness and the Englishness part of it, I don't necessarily think it's particularly about that. I don't think the FA has a specific duty to support them in particular, beyond the overall principle of supporting, local, ethical, small businesses. I think that's an important thing, but I don't think it's the Englishness inherent within that really counts. But it does have an elevated position, and therefore every opportunity to make choices that reflect certain traditions will present themselves to the FA on a regular basis. And for me, that's an Umbro kit, and that's a position I've come to quite recently. It's not something I've thought for years and years, but I've found that Nike, being England's technical partner over the years that it's been in place, has worn on me in the years since Umbro did the last kits. I think what matters in this is more the FA's corporate vision and public image being a positive one, rather than kind of really specifically honing in on English businesses. This is we've partly covered it already, Dave, but should we even care where the FA's money comes from? Got Wembley to pay for.
Yeah, again, it's a really difficult situation, isn't it, Chris? Because there's things that we just can't say because we either A, do not have all the knowledge of the complete situation, or B, we don't want to get ourselves in an awful lot of legal trouble. But I think there are bills to be paid, and we've built Wembley, we've built St George's Park, we've allegedly gone for the best of everything in both situations. Whether we've used common sense enough or not is another debate, but there's certainly been very, very little expense spared. That has to be paid for from somewhere. The English FA cannot command huge TV deals like the Premier League can. They cannot. They do not have even the power that an individual football club has to negotiate. So they are in a difficult position. And if Vauxhall come along and say, we want to be your partner and your most prominent sponsor, and we are going to pay you quite a lot of money to do it, there's just no reason for them not to take it. That's the thing. It's I think any drive towards British business and supporting British business has to be on ethical levels, because financially there is no incentive to do it, because whatever you think of English international football and whatever your feelings are towards the England side, there is still so much money to be made from being a partner of that squad. I mean, right down to who makes the suits that they wear when they fly out to the World Cup. There are commercial opportunities. Where there are commercial opportunities, there will be a hierarchy of those that are willing to pay a premium to have it. So I think as long as I have the same problems you have with getting swathes of money from betting sites and betting companies, because I think you've got to look at what you're promoting there, and I think, let's be honest, they get enough support and visibility in the Premier League. I would like to see us clean of all that side of things, but in regards to everything else, I'm a bit like you, Chris. I think as long as it's a company that are paying their taxes, I haven't got a massive issue if it is a McDonald's doing another advert with Alan Shearer.
Yeah, I can't complain about McDonald's, really.
No.
Not with my physique. We'll finish off this week with the player wall. It's not a physical wall yet. I can see the wall, but I haven't written up the cards for the previous couple of players yet. Dave, the nomination for the player wall this week sits with you. Who are we going for?
We are going for a player who is up there in my England affections with Paul Gascoigne. And people are often surprised when I say that, but it is Owen Hargreaves, who he became, sadly for some, he's basically the sort of Twitter generation's Paul Lake, in that they saw a lot more of Hargreaves. And the thing about him was that all of his best work was all of the things that at the time he was playing, because football's come on a lot even in the last sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 years, were all of the things that we would absolutely cherish now. If he had been born a bit later and was playing at his pomp now, he would be he'd be one of the most cherished players in the Premier League. Phenomenal when fully fit in terms of getting round the pitch. I mean, he was like a wasp in midfield. You would have hated playing against him. And a really big game player. Loved a tournament game. And we're talking about a player here, Chris, who in his entirety of his career made only a little over 350 appearances in all competitions for all clubs and England included, which is just criminal, absolutely criminal. And the biggest, when he moved to Manchester United, I remember being incredibly excited that he was going to be playing in England and that he could, because the only thing he'd been missing a little bit from the England appearances we'd seen him was he needed to be sort of bulk up a bit, really, be slightly more, add a little bit of physicality to his game, which he did. But his injuries were just crippling, and I was reading a thing about that broke my heart, really, which is that one of the problems he had was persistent tendinitis, and what they used to do to treat that is literally strip the tendon. So they would go in and remove the bad tendon in the hope that good tendon would grow back. And even in the sort of last decade, that has been widely acknowledged as like the single worst thing you can do, basically. And there are some absolutely incredible treatments now for the same injuries. And it just makes me so sad. But seeing Owen Hargreaves playing at the top of his game in an England shirt was something really, really special to me. And I just loved his drive. I loved his range of passing was exceptional, absolutely exceptional, completely underrated. And he did the one thing that England midfielders never do. I'm looking at you, Steven Gerrard and Frank Lampard and several others, in that he was quite happy making other players better. He was quite happy doing not the donkey work, because He was doing far more than that, but he was quite happy taking responsibility for his own game and providing a platform for others, and just a glorious player, and it absolutely crying shame.
I always thought of him as playing in a kind of cultured disruptor role. He was expected, certainly for Man United and for England, to break up the opposition's play, but he was expected to start his own as well. He wasn't averse to getting further forward. I think the 2008 Champions League final, his performance sticks out in particular in that regard. You know, the highlights of that game, when you watch them back, he's playing 30 yards from goal. And he was a terrific ball player. I think that the education and culture of a different upbringing was very much in evidence. And actually, that's a credit to Canada as much as Germany, because he was probably mid-teens before he went to Germany. And it's that different approach, that the fact that he was so unusual compared to other England players that makes him stand out to me. He was born in Canada. He played under-19 football for Wales, and he finished his education at Bayern Munich, famously. And he was able to make his name in the first team there before switching to United after he'd made his mark for England. It always surprises me, Dave, that he played for England as far back as 2001.
Yeah.
Because I really don't particularly remember much of him until he was named in the Euro 2004 squad. And then it was World Cup 2006 where he became
absolute giant
for a period. Yeah.
Absolute
England's
giant.
best player.
And
I think he was voted as such as well, wasn't he?
And when I say he was England's best player, it wasn't even close. It was an absolute country mile. And the game we went out against Portugal, we spoke on another podcast relatively recently about and how on another day, if things had gone just slightly different, England could have got through that game. But with the amount of talent that was on that pitch, he was not only man of the match in that game, he was, again, by a country mile, the best player on that pitch. And he was, I think I'm right in saying, somebody might shoot me down on this, because I've not checked it, but I'm pretty sure he was the only one who scored his penalty, wasn't he, in the shootout?
100% correct.
Yeah. And I think he was then, I think 2006 and 2007, I think he was possibly named England's Player of the Year.
Definitely 2006.
And it was absolutely deserved, but you really can't talk about Hargreaves without talking about the injuries, and that is such a devastating thing to say. It's such an upsetting thing to say, because we could have had a midfielder there who would have comfortably... I mean, he played 42 times for England, which is more than he played for Man United, and he was at Man United for 4 seasons.
Yeah, went in 2007.
Yeah, and it's heartbreaking. You know, he is probably the only other England player other than Theo Walcott has broke my heart, but for very, very different reasons. And
just to bring it all the way round, the last player from England to score in the Bundesliga before Ademola Lookman was
Owen Hargreaves.
And that's all we've got time for this week. I'm at Chris M. Nee on Twitter. He's at David Hartrick. And you can follow Sphinx FTBL on Twitter and Facebook for some other podcast bits and even more exciting football stuff to come. Cheerio.
Cheerio.